The Sesh Podcast, episode 211, take 1. Hi friends, and welcome back to The Sesh. I'm Janelle, and I am doing a solo episode, well, kind of today. I have 3 lovely people with me here. I've got Charlie, he's a people, and I have Karelly and Sydney, of course. Welcome, ladies. Kendall has bronchitis, which is not good, and none of us are trying to catch that, and poor thing can barely talk without hacking up a lung. So she is at home, but she wishes she could be here, especially for this episode, because boy, do we have a big topic to get into today. We are going to be discussing the newest memoir that has come out from Shari Franke, who is Ruby Franke's daughter. This memoir is called The House of My Mother, and she talked so much about her experience growing up in the household that, many people know as 8 Passengers. It was a huge YouTube channel for a long time. Thousands, hundreds and thousands and millions at one point of subscribers. And yeah, I mean, it was extremely popular. And I know that we've talked about this topic in the past, especially when news broke that Jodi and Ruby were getting arrested. And, we talked about some of the details surrounding that in previous episodes, which we'll link below if you want to go check that out if you're not familiar. Obviously, we're going to be going through a lot of detail, and we'll kind of be touching on a couple of the details that we had talked about last time. But really, for the most part, we're going to focus on all the new details that Shari was sharing in her memoir. And let me tell you, this is intense, okay? There's no other way to put it. It is very sad, disturbing, intense, but also incredibly inspirational. Shari just seems like such a strong, resilient woman, and I am so proud of her for coming out and telling her story, because it is truly like nothing else what she and her siblings have been through. So yeah, we're going to be going through that. Obviously, I mean, this is an entire book, and I'm not just going to sit here and rehash every single detail in the book. So I highly suggest listening or reading her book yourself if you would like to, but we are going to be diving into quite a bit here. There is a lot to talk about, so I'm expecting this episode to be quite long, although maybe not as long as it would have been, because Kendall and I tend to just babble at each other constantly. So if I don't have her to just ramble with, maybe it'll be a little bit shorter. But regardless, it's going to be a lot of information to go over. So I honestly don't want to spend too much more time on this intro, just because I want to get right into the topic. One thing before we do, I wanted to mention, obviously, we have been covering the Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively case and the lawsuits and all of the drama with that for the last 2 episodes. And recently, there has been a new major update, because as of last week, Justin Baldoni has decided to directly sue Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds, as well as their publicist, for $400 million in damages. And that was filed last Thursday on January 16th. $400 million. That's crazy. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. And I don't want to go too much into this. I think we'll probably end up touching more on it next week, just because we've been following it so closely. But I just want to mention, yes, I know about the lawsuit. It's absolutely insane. And yeah, there's some wild claims in there. The lawsuit alleged extortion and defamation. Baldoni's attorney, Brian Freeman, said it is based on, quote, an overwhelming amount of untampered evidence. So it sounds like they have the receipts, the screenshots, the timeline, fucking everything. Okay. And we actually haven't had a chance to go in and look at it, because that wasn't our priority for this week. But it does sound like there's quite a bit of stuff in there. So I'm definitely curious to look more into it and see what really is going on. Justin and his legal team allege that Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds went on a mission to destroy his reputation and career after hijacking the film. And Justin claims that Blake Lively began asserting control over the film, inserting herself into the production process in intrusive ways, and also describes Blake Lively as difficult and claims her interference would persist every day of the shoot and disrupt the schedule. Another quick side note of this lawsuit, which of course what's a bigger buzzword online than Taylor Swift? Taylor Swift has now been brought into this lawsuit. In the lawsuit, Justin also claims that Taylor Swift was brought into this because if you didn't know, Blake Lively is really good friends with Taylor Swift. And supposedly she also has a part in this whole thing, pushing the actor to change the script. But according to the Daily Mail, Taylor Swift's super confused about why she's being dragged into the drama when she has nothing to do with any of this, which I'm also a little bit confused, but maybe we'll learn more as time goes on. There's a quote in here that says, Taylor is proud of the film because her music was featured in it, which gave her a sense of involvement, though she wasn't fully aware of the extent of the project's developments. So we'll see what happens. I think that if you're going to bring Taylor Swift into a lawsuit, you better have your facts fucking straight because, well, she's clearly one of the most powerful people on this entire planet, and her fans are like an army in and of themselves. So I guess he must seem pretty confident that whatever he's bringing forward has, truth and that he can back it up. But yeah, we'll definitely talk more about this next week. And I think by then there will probably be some more details as well that will kind of help clarify some of the questions that we have. But yeah, crazy stuff. I think this whole lawsuit is going to be the lawsuit of the year, if you will. Well, that and Diddy, of course, but
such different types of lawsuits.
Yeah, definitely very different, but nonetheless, very public in the media. So yeah, we'll see what happens. Okay, so I think we should probably just go ahead and jump right in. Like I said, this is a overview. I don't even want to say brief overview because it is, we are going through a lot, but it is definitely nonetheless still an overview. If you have already listened or read the book, I'm sure that there will be details that I don't mention that you recall. And, like I said, I'm not here to talk about every single little example and story that Shari shares in her memoir. But I felt like it was very interesting and needed to be spoken about, especially because we have talked about this case several times in the past. So like I said, we will link the episodes that we have talked about the Frankies down below in the description box if you want to go ahead and check those out. But yeah, let's go ahead and just jump right in. You ever go to the grocery store and you find yourself just wandering the aisles and you don't even know what to buy because you're like, it's too much of a pain to put together meals in my head right now. So then you come home with a bunch of snacks, no actual meals or ingredients to cook the meals with, and therefore you're lost at what to make for dinner. Well, that's all changed thanks to Hungry Root. Hungry Root is like having your own personal shopper and nutritionist all wrapped into one. They take care of the weekly grocery shopping, recommending healthy groceries and meals tailored to your taste, nutrition preferences, and health goals. They make it easy to eat high-quality, nutritious food and achieve any diet or health goals for anti-inflammatory to gut-friendly, gluten-free, or dairy-free, high protein, and more. Shopping, planning, and cooking food really can be simple and stress-free. Just tell them about your goals and preferences, and they'll fill your cart with personalized recommendations that get smarter as they learn more about what you liked or don't love. All of Hungry Root's recipes can be made in just 15 minutes or less, which is really great. And with over 15,000 recipes shipped each week, there's something for every taste and nutrition preference. And what's really cool is that Hungry Root also has healthy groceries like smoothies, kids snacks, sweets, ready-to-eat meals, salad kits, and even supplements. There's no high fructose corn syrup, artificial sweeteners, or preservatives in any of Hungry Root's food. One of the things that I really like about Hungry Root is they have great snacks that you can just take on the go. And so recently I've been relying on Hungry Root to get me little snacks that are good before I work out. Yesterday I actually had sun butter and jam dipper, which was perfect. It was really delicious, it was healthy, and it gave me the energy I needed to have a good workout. You're going to love Hungry Root as much as I do. Take advantage of this exclusive offer. For a limited time, get 40% off your first box, plus get a free item in every box for life. Go to hungryroot.com/sesh and use code sesh. That's hungryroot.com/sesh and use code sesh to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. hungryroot.com/sesh, code sesh. All right, so Ruby Franke's oldest child, Shari Franke, released a tell-all memoir on January 7th called The House of My Mother, A Daughter's Quest for Freedom. And like we had kind of talked about before, Ruby Franke is a mom who lives in Springville, Utah. She had a YouTube channel called 8 Passengers, and they vlogged about all of the challenges and crazy things that come with raising 6 kids. 6 kids is a lot of kids.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it is.
That's very rare for a family to have 6 children. So people thought it was fascinating and they were uploading every single day. And the clickbait was clickbaiting. And, we'll get more into this. But yeah, it was an extremely popular YouTube channel for a long time. And just so you know, it was Ruby, and then her husband, his name is Kevin, and then the 6 kids. So Shari, Chad, Abby, Julie, Russell, and Eve. One of the things that the channel really focused on was this sense of like no-nonsense parenting. It was very strict. They had tons of rules. Ruby's sense of parenting was very, I think, different than a lot of families this day and age. So I think a lot of people were just fascinated by the whole thing. But yeah, she was very strict, no nonsense, very structured. But honestly, those things aren't bad, right? Having strict parents, having structure isn't necessarily a bad thing. So obviously, Ruby's parenting style went far beyond that in a much darker and, disgusting, honestly, a disgusting path, abusive and horrific. And yeah, Shari shares it all in her book. So, and if for some, this is pretty well known, but if for some reason you don't know, the family is part of the LDS Church, which obviously in the LDS Church, I think it's more common to have big families, but still, to have a vlog channel where you have 6 kids on camera 24/7, you're uploading all the time, like it's going to gain traction. This is something that people were just so fascinated with. And yeah, it was a very lucrative YouTube channel, to say the least. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about Ruby's life and, her upbringing and what she was up to before she started a family, before she started the YouTube channel, all that stuff. So Ruby was born in Logan, Utah, and was the oldest of 5, and she grew up LDS just as the generations before her. So this was nothing new to her. She had grown up in the church and continued that through her own children. And as the oldest of 5 in a strict household, she was tasked with taking care of her younger siblings, which is interesting because that also reminds me of the 19 kids and counting family, the Duggar family. They are not LDS. They are, I forgot what branch they are of Christianity, but regardless, tons of kids. And even on this show, because I used to watch that show all the time, the older kids would take care of the younger kids. Like that was just the thing that you do. And so, yeah, it reminded me of that, which obviously, if you don't know about that whole family, absolutely disturbing and horrific. The oldest son was accused of disgusting crimes. He's in prison. That's a whole other side tangent that I'm not going on.
Do you want to know what religion they were?
Yeah, what were they?
They were devout, independent, conservative Baptist.
Yes, very much so. And Shari talks about how Ruby always wanted to be a mom. It was really her calling. And so when Ruby went to college, which by the way, she went to Utah State University, she had one goal in mind: to find a husband so she could start her divine purpose in life, which was starting a family. So Kevin was also attending Utah State University, and he was a senior at the time. He was about to finish his civil engineering degree, and he was also heavily involved in the LDS Church. And Ruby wanted someone who would let her take the reins, but be there to pay the bills and support this big family that she really wanted. Now, a little bit about Kevin here. He was born in Ogden, Utah. He was the youngest of 7 children and grew up in an easygoing environment. That's one thing that she talked about a lot. It's like he was very easygoing. He was relaxed. He was pretty chill. He wasn't that rigid. And Ruby was. So it was almost like the perfect match, right? Because he's kind of like, you take the reins, you take control, and I'll just kind of like be on, here for the ride type of thing. So the two of them did not date long before they went and got married. Only 2 weeks after they met, Ruby asked him, "So are we getting married?" And Kevin, who was a little bit shocked, said yes. And they got married on December 28th, only 3 months after they met.
That's also a pretty common thing in the LDS Church.
And this should come as no surprise to you, but Ruby was the type of person who was really a perfectionist. She wanted to be good at everything that she did. She had this sense of like exceptionalism, and motherhood was obviously no different. And Kevin was okay with kind of, potentially having a smaller family. But again, Kevin was easygoing. He didn't really care. And so Ruby was like, no. We're going to have a giant family. And really what it became was like a cult to some degree. It was like the 8 passengers clan, I guess you could say. All right, so fast forward a little bit here. They're married and they're ready to start a family. And on March 3rd, 2003, Shari was born. And of course, she was the first of the Franke children. And this is so sad. She talks about how she basically had to fight to survive from the beginning because actually at one point when she was really young, she had some health complications, including an intestinal blockage, and she had to, I believe she got surgery, right?
Yeah, she said that if she hadn't gotten surgery, then she would have died. And I think she was like 3 months old.
Yeah, that's so scary. But yeah, she basically talked about how from the beginning she had to fight for survival. And this, unfortunately, is a common theme throughout all of her upbringing. Like I said before, Ruby was strict, okay? She was not the type to coddle her kids. She was the type to ignore temper tantrums. She believed in letting them cry it out. It really kind of mirrored her own family's philosophy. That's how she was raised. And I'm not here to like shame people's parenting style. I know that, well, first off, I'm not a parent, so I don't really like have an experience on this, but I know that there are a lot of parents out there who, you know, believe in the cry it out method, and I'm not here to, you know, shame that. But obviously, Ruby went far beyond just these parenting styles. She would punish her kids for crying, but interestingly enough, Shari says that her first memory of Ruby was Ruby crying. She seemed to cry over anything, whether it was being happy, sad, bored, joy, didn't matter. Shari said that Ruby was crying all the time. However, the kids were not allowed to cry. This really caused Shari to bottle up her emotions. Like, she didn't feel comfortable expressing herself or having those emotions. And she believed that, you know, her pain or any emotion that's negative really didn't matter to Ruby. And this, I mean, naturally, if this was you, you'd become super guarded with your emotions because you know that if you ever show them, that it's not going to end well. So she basically put up a wall and stopped showing them. So before the 8 Passengers YouTube channel was created, Shari created a mommy blog. And I think, especially back then, this was very common. I mean, blogging was the thing before vlogging, right? Tons of families and people, celebrities, whoever, had blogs to share their lives, to share their tips and tricks on whatever it may be. You know, it was a place where the kids could look back on. It was almost like a journal, but live, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. For other, I guess not live, but public, I should say. A place where, you know, she could express herself, and one day the kids would be able to look back on it. She shared like recipes of home cooked meals and, you know, like recipes for bread. But it's interesting because Shari says that her mom hardly ever shared these recipes in real life. So you get this sense that Ruby was really doing this to put on a front, to put this public image out there of what she wanted to be portrayed as. And around this time, she started branding and watermarking the family photos with, quote, "It's a Franke life," which showcased this, again, very perfect family. She's like literally branding her family.
That is so weird.
And it seems like she had this plan to do that before she even had kids.
Yeah.
Like, this was her, this is a kind of a side tangent. We've already passed this, but there was this part where she's talking about like the list of what she needs to make sure that she has a perfect husband and a checklist. And when she found Kevin, he checked off those boxes. And so it's like from the beginning, she had this idea of what she wanted her life to look like. And her mission was to create this like perfect image to the public. And meanwhile, behind closed doors,
she's an awful, horrible human being.
Yeah, who watermarks their family photos?
I know, it's very bizarre. So growing up, Ruby made all of her children learn the piano, and she was really, really strict on it. And this is, you know, where things start getting slightly physical, and the punishments really start to come at play from a young age. Overplaying the piano, like if you're giving your kids piano lessons, it should be about having fun and just, you know, learning a new skill and trying something out.
And obviously they're going to mess up. Like,
right.
They're learning.
Yes.
And I think at this time, Shari was probably around 5 years old. She was really, really young.
Yeah. And it's
a piano.
she's a fucking kid.
Yeah.
Like,
right.
nothing she's going to do is perfect. That's what kids do. But Ruby would smack Shari on the lips or tug on her ear if Shari showed any signs of distress. And this is when Shari realized she was, quote, not a nice mommy, which is just so heartbreaking to realize that at such a young age and basically be felt as though you're just this prop for this woman to make this perfect life and mold you into exactly what she wanted.
And I'm sure this like caused Shari to become extremely hyper aware of like facial expressions. This is what Shari says in her book. If she frowned, if she showed literally any negative emotion on her face, she would get smacked, especially at that young of an age. That's such a pivotal time in like a child's development.
Yeah, it's terrible parenting. Like you're basically raising a human to have saying that like having any sort of emotions is bad. So just bottle them up. Here's another example of the kind of craziness that started when she was a young age. Shari talked about how if she came into their room at night when she had like an upset stomach or wasn't feeling good and was asking for help, Ruby would just sigh and tell her to go back to bed. And yeah, Shari really felt like she was walking on eggshells at home at just 5 years old. And Ruby's philosophy was everyone contributes, everyone stays busy. On paper, seems like, okay, that may be not the worst thing to teach a family to an extent. As a kid, you're teaching them
responsibility.
Yeah. Maybe like, let's make your bed or come, please bring your dishes to the sink, something like that. But obviously she took it too far. Her kids were given chores as soon as they learned to walk and talk. There was no sense of like playing. You weren't having fun at the house. You were learning things, you were being punished, you were working, you were contributing to the household to some extent. The family had like a very established routine. She talked about how they start the day at 6 a.m. with piano lessons and then have breakfast. Then the kids were in charge of packing their own lunches, even the youngest ones. And according to Ruby, it taught kids responsibility and self-reliance. And we had talked about this in one of the previous episodes when we were covering this topic. There's a vlog out there where one of the kids is...
The youngest one.
Yes, it was the youngest one, wasn't it? Yeah. They were in kindergarten and she was supposed to pack her lunch. She didn't. She forgot to pack her lunch. And so the school called and was like, hey, she doesn't have a lunch. Can you please bring one over? And Ruby was like, no, I'm not going to do that. It's time for her to learn a tough lesson. She, didn't pack her lunch. So she's going to have to go hungry, which is just... As a 5-year-old?
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
You don't understand really what's going on at that age. Like all your classmates are eating their lunches and you're...
Right. The only responsibility as a 5-year-old you should do to, prepare for school is like, okay, put your shoes on. Did you put your shoes on? Good job. But
not
to
having
pack
an
your own
accident,
lunch,
for goodness sake.
like how do you even know as a kid what you're supposed to get for lunch?
Exactly.
Right.
What's a balanced meal? As a 5-year-old, you don't know what that entails. And Ruby wouldn't even take them to school. She made them walk to school, no matter the weather, which, by the way, don't forget, they're in Utah.
And
So it's absolutely freezing there half the time. And yeah, they all walked to school. No matter the age, they walked to school.
That's just irresponsible as a parent to like let your 5-year-old walk to school
by themselves. The only time that she would give them rides was if it was their birthdays. Happy birthday, you don't have to walk to school.
Oh my God, horrible.
So horrible.
Kind of seems like they always gave them, like for birthdays and stuff, they never gave them like tangible things, which is fine. Like, a lot of parents, a lot of families don't give gifts and stuff, but like the only gift you're giving them when you guys have the resources to get them.
Yeah, they have the resources.
You want to feel special on your birthday.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you get a ride to school. And yeah, the kids, they never really had other kids over because, there was no fun at the house. So there was no like play dates and stuff. And it was just a lot of strict, schedules and chores. So as Shari got older, she started biting her lip as a nervous tick, which left some marks and scabs on her. And this pissed Ruby off. And she'd say things like, no man is going to want you looking like that, which is so sad and horrible to hear at any point in time, but especially in, your younger age. And you wonder why she has a nervous tick. Well, she's like terrified of her own family. And she talks about how her anxiety was just getting worse and worse. And that's when she decided to pick up the habit of nightly journaling. And, vlogging is like a modern version of journaling. not only would they be sharing their faith and values in daily lives, but they'd also be practicing missionary work with an audience. But yeah, that's like pretty common in LDS to basically like keep record. So yeah, she started journaling a lot. And in one of her entries, she talks about how her parents blame her for her issues with friends and that she's not fun to be around. And even when she would get invited to a party, her parents wouldn't let her go. So like, it's so sad because she grows up in this really strict, structured household. They're not really allowed to do anything. They're not allowed to have friends over. And they're not allowed to go to other people's friends or to go to parties or whatever. And so naturally, if you're not practicing those social skills, you're not going to have a lot of them. But her parents are, her mom is literally blaming her for that. And that she's like, oh, you're not fun to be around. It's like, well, you're not giving me a chance to try to.
Another thing that I think is really interesting is a reason why she wasn't allowed to go to parties and stuff was if boys were over. And I think that this, later on we'll get into, honestly really contributed to a lot of her relationships with men especially.
Yes, we'll talk about this particular relationship that she had that was sadly very, very abusive. But I think it all ties back to this sense of like control and not being allowed to like have any sort of relationship with boys. One of the things that Ruby was obsessed with was West Point Military Academy. And she got a lot of, I guess, inspiration, you could say, from this academy and would use physical activity as a form of punishment. For example, she was mad at Chad and Shari for not putting away laundry, so she made them run 5 laps. Or another time, Chad didn't clean the dinner table, and so she made him do push-ups for not cleaning and Shari for not holding Chad accountable, which that part is so weird.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's your job to hold him accountable, not your other child's.
I'm pretty sure it's 5 laps around the neighborhood too. Which is
like,
insane. Barefoot or something like that, which is crazy.
Yeah. And I keep saying what's really sad. This whole thing is so sad. But Ruby always maintained this very emotional distance with her kids. She reminded her kids that she was not their friend, she was their mom. There's a big difference. And I think to an extent, you know, as when you're parenting, you obviously want to make sure that you are a parent, you know, before just being your kid's friend. But at the same time, I feel like just saying that puts this wall between your kids of like, I'm your parent. I'm only here to, you know, discipline. I'm not here to, you know, have any sort of like positive emotional connection with you. Yeah, it's horrible. One time, Shari asked why they never got lunch together, like she would see her friends do with their moms. And Ruby responded, quote, "My job is to train you how to be ready for the world. When you're an adult, we can be friends." That breaks my heart. Like, man, I have so many fond memories of doing fun things with my mom, you know, when I was a kid. And it's like some of my best memories. And it just made me feel so much closer to her and like respect her so much more as a parent. It just breaks my heart. So as you know, the winter months are filled with nasty colds, stuffy noses, runny noses, and if you're a parent out there, you know how difficult it can be to get your kid to blow their nose and to give them some relief that they so desperately need from all that congestion. And even though I don't have kids of my own, I know that Navage is something that Kendall uses all the time with Holly, because Navage Baby is designed to last longer and give baby-safe, pediatrician recommended congestion relief that kids need. The Navage Baby aspirator is a game changer for anyone who's struggled with aspirators that break, leak, or take too much effort to use. The gentle suction is so effective at clearing mucus, no more sucking it out yourself. The collection cup is 40% larger than other leading brands, and unique overflow protection features and sealed control buttons help keep it working smoothly. And what's really cool is that it's easy to use with one hand and plays calming music, so you and your baby can both relax. Kendall's also been using the Navage Baby Inhaler, which lasts 50% longer than other top-selling inhalers, which is so important when you're using it daily. It has a quiet, continuous mist of drug-free sterile saline solution to break down congestion, moisturize pathways, and soothe baby's upper respiratory system. Just last weekend, I was texting Kendall, and as you know, Kendall is very sick, and poor Holly definitely has a cold as well. And she was telling me how amazing Navage products are. Navage Baby Aspirator and Inhaler are designed to last longer so we can trust them to be there when we need them. Parenting is hard, make life easier. Order the new Navage Baby Aspirator and Inhaler today. I know you'll thank me for the tip. Our listeners can order directly from our exclusive URL, navage.com/sesh. You can order both products and get full product details. Again, that's navage.com/sesh. Don't wait. Order now at navage.com/sesh. So fast forward here a little bit. Let's get into the start of 8 Passengers. Once Ruby turned 30, she was done having kids, and she's like, I need another outlet, okay? I'm not getting pregnant anymore. I'm not having any more kids. And at this time, Ruby's sisters, Ellie and Bonnie, were actually on YouTube vlogging already about family and like fertility journeys and stuff. And so, and also, you know, this was around the time where YouTube really started getting that like family vlogger niche.
I think vlogging in general.
Yeah, vlogging in general. Yeah, you're right. But especially like people vlogging their families or vlogging their, you know, trying to get pregnant or whatever it may be. And so Ruby was like, hey, like I could fucking do this. Let's do it. Yeah, she's like, let me go ahead and start this channel. And she had this big family, like I said, 6 kids. They have this very unique lifestyle in the sense of things were much more strict and much more structured, and she had weird rules. And so she's like, I can turn this shit into content. And Shari was about 12 years old, and she was like excited about this because I think, especially as a kid, you wouldn't have known, like basically making home videos and uploading it. Cool, YouTube, that's a fun thing. And other families are doing it, and they're getting comments, and you know, they're getting attention online and praise or whatever. So I could totally see how at that age you'd be like, yeah, sure, I'm down. That sounds fun.
At that age, you don't understand the repercussions of that either.
Of course,
like,
yeah.
Nothing to base
especially back then, because it was so new that there wasn't this whole discussion around it like there is now. So Shari doesn't really remember the exact date that they started vlogging, but she talked about how, you know, they were a normal family, and then the next thing she knew, there was a camera right in front of their face, capturing every moment of their lives for the whole internet to see. And then on January 8th, 2015, Ruby launched 8 Passengers, and their first video went live. And it was actually about Shari's youngest sister. It showed her gender reveal, which, okay, so basically she kind of, like at the time when they uploaded this, the kid was already a toddler, but I think for the first video, Ruby kind of took some like old home video footage of the gender reveal, and then the first time the kids met their youngest sibling, and then it kind of like cut to her as a toddler now. And then the second video was published a week later, titled Tasting Sushi for the First Time. And then the third video was posted 3 days later, and then it just became more and more frequent to the point where Ruby was sharing every aspect of the kids' lives.
Even when they were sick.
Yep. Everything. And Ruby became absolutely fucking obsessed with this. Like, she was so focused on building a subscriber base and monetizing her channel. And after 6 months, they were eligible for monetization, which I don't think most people know this, but in order to monetize your channel, you have to have at least 1,000 subscribers or 40 watch hours. And I'm not sure if that was still the case back then, but that's how it is now. But regardless, after 6 months, she starts monetizing her channel, which obviously is going to, you know, inspire her to just make that much more content, because now money's coming in. The first video that actually went viral was of her younger sister climbing out of her crib, which gained over 50,000 views in a very short time. Then the next thing they knew, the video hit 50 million views. And this is when the channel started really blowing up. By September of 2015, they reached 5,000 subscribers. And then by April of 2016, 100,000 subscribers. And then by August of 2016, 400,000 subscribers. And like I said, at its peak, the channel had over 2 million subs. And this whole tidbit, I think, is still very relevant in today's day and age. So once the channel started to really blow up and, you know, take off, they actually remodeled their house to be more photogenic, as Shari described. And they kind of transitioned from a normal family to like YouTube stars. And, you know, I feel like there's this pressure, whether you're family vlogging, whether you're a single influencer, whatever it may be, to have this like picture perfect life. Like even on TikTok, there's people who are like filming their house tours or just their day in their lives, or on YouTube. And so many people have these like immaculate homes, clean, not cluttered. They look like they're like staged homes. They're beautiful. They're perfect. And I think there's this real pressure of putting on this front to make yourself look aesthetically pleasing or photogenic, like Shari said. And people eat that shit up. Even I am guilty of, when I see content of other people's homes who have like these gorgeous, immaculate homes, I'm like, ooh, I want my house to look like that. And, you know, why do I have so much clutter and like random crap around here?
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of like, you remember that trend on TikTok where people are making ice cubes?
Yes.
That's, I don't know why, like it kind of
Totally.
reminds me of this.
The glitter.
Yep.
And the rose petals.
Yep.
Or even like they're doing like dance videos, like the background is just
Yeah.
like not even that's a focus, but just it's always looks perfect.
Mm-hmm. And what's crazy is that Shari learned that the best time to start asking, you know, permission for something if she wanted something or wanted to do something was when the camera was rolling. Because if the camera is rolling, then Ruby was nicer because she intended to upload that footage to the internet. But then Ruby would start to twist things and use it against the kids. Like if they wanted ice cream, they could pay for it with the 8 passengers credit card if they filmed it. So it's like, oh, you want to do something? Okay, but we have to turn it into content. We need to make sure that we can write it off in taxes. And, you know, Shari learned about the magic of tax write-offs before she could even drive. So this whole idea of like, everything we do is for the camera. You want to go on vacation, it's for the camera. You want to go get ice cream, it's for the camera. You want to have a birthday party, it's for the camera. Everything is content. And of course, what comes with online fame? Lots of free stuff. It's no secret that many influencers are sent tons of PR. They're, you know, sent on vacations, brand trips, whatever it is. And, you know, the Frankies were no exception. They were getting tons of PR. They were going on free vacations. But of course, with that, you're making content. You're expected to film it and upload it. Soon after they started monetizing their channel, Ruby really became the breadwinner, and that totally filled her ego. And she was receiving all this like external validation that she wanted, but it was never enough, and it was at the cost of her family's privacy. And, you know, Ruby claims the kids wanted to be in these videos, but the truth is they really had no choice but to be in these videos, right? Like, that's what's so, I feel like, hard about family vlogging is many times when they start, the kids are so young, they don't even know what's going on. So like, okay, sure, whatever, you can film me for a video. But then they start making a lot of money and they start going on trips, and their livelihood depends on these videos and filming the kids. And I think a lot of kids feel like they have no choice but to say yes and to stick to, you know, the filming schedule because they don't want to mess up the family's livelihood. So Sabbath, Shari had, you know, no confidence to say, hey, I don't want to be filmed today. You know, I'm not in the mood, because obviously that would really piss off Ruby and would not end well. So in 2017, Shari actually started her own YouTube channel because at this point they're making a lot of money and she saw the potential for it. However, Shari was only 14 at the time, and so obviously her mom was going to be managing her earnings through the YouTube channel. And Ruby said it'd be a nest egg she could use when she was of age. And Shari asked for a shout out on 8 passengers for her new channel. And Ruby was like, absolutely not. You're not getting any shortcuts here. You need to work just like the rest of us. You're not getting a shout out for the channel until you reach 100,000 subscribers.
At age 14.
At age 14.
Yeah, she's like treating her like all of, because Ruby's like, I don't shout anybody else unless they have 100,000. Like,
not even like a, hey, my kids started their own YouTube channel, which which I have thoughts on that in general, just like children that young starting their own channel. I don't know. That's a whole different discussion. So, you know, at this point, things were starting to become very difficult. Shari was growing more and more depressed with her home life, and her dad noticed a change in her and asked if, maybe she wanted to talk to someone. And they brought this up to Ruby, who immediately shut down the idea of therapy. She was super against it. She said that all Shari needed was more sleep, exercise, and to eat right. Basically, have a more strict schedule and you'll be fine. And in September of 2017, 8 Passengers had hit a milestone, 1 million subscribers. So as you can imagine, the pressure was higher than ever to continue the performance of the videos. Ruby used so much clickbait. If you go back and just look at the channel's gone, but there's a second channel. She had a second channel at one point. That's still up. There's channels that have re-uploaded her original content. The clickbait is crazy. And clickbait in itself, I don't think is a bad thing, but clickbaiting your kids?
Yeah.
For example, she would title things like Shari's crush in all caps to get as many views as possible, even though she wasn't even allowed to date or have friends that were boys. But even if she was, you don't use that as a title. That's, such a personal thing that your kid is going through. Here's another example that I found absolutely wild. So at one point, Ruby insisted on waxing Shari's eyebrows for a video, and she ended up waxing off half of her eyebrow. And let me just read you this quote here from the book. So Shari writes, quote, "I was mortified, but of course, Ruby kept the camera rolling, zooming in on my face like she was documenting a rare species of unibrowed teen in its natural habitat. The money shot indeed. Shari, I'm so sorry," she exclaimed, her voice quivering with what I'm sure was remorse and definitely not barely contained glee at striking content gold. Sure enough, the video titled Shari, I'm so sorry, with the thumbnail of me mid-ugly cry. So not only is it embarrassing to have half your eyebrow gone, dude, I remember in college I waxed off half my eyebrow. That was so rough. I had to teach myself how to use the Anastasia brow dip.
Oh, man.
But Shari's a teen and she's being filmed during this. And then her mom is using it for clickbait with a thumbnail of it. It's so fucked up. So bad. Okay, so moving forward here, on Shari's 15th birthday, Ruby gave her a tripod to open up on camera, of course, and finally shouted out Shari's YouTube channel and linked it in the bio. And Shari talks about how she felt some, form of validation from Ruby finally. As a teenager, she was making decent money, a few $1,000s a month.
That's a lot for a teenager.
Yeah, that's a lot. And, she has her own YouTube channel, so things are finally, taking off with that. But, she wouldn't be allowed to touch it until she was 18. And Ruby ended up telling her that she'd be taking 10% of what Shari makes since her channel wouldn't have taken off without her mother, which is
not true.
Doesn't make sense because you didn't give her a shout out till she had 100,000 subscribers.
Right.
So, and that's just so, why? You don't need the money. You're making plenty of money. Your kids are making you money just on the 8 Passengers channel. So let's go ahead and get into the introduction of Jodi Hildebrandt, who is obviously another huge key player in this entire story. Absolutely disgusting human being. So in August of 2018, the Franke family went on a big family vacation to Universal Studios in Hollywood, which was the biggest brand collab that they had ever had. And they were let in early so they could explore it. But of course, this was under the assumption that they're going to film it and stuff. But regardless, big family trip, so exciting, whatever. And Shari said the road trip was planned with military precision. Quote, "Each camera-worthy moment was scheduled down to the millisecond. And according to Shari, Ruby told the kids, quote, we're going to make a big mess so that we can show how well wet ones work, like wet wipes. The kids were rubbing gummy bears on the windows and slime was all over the place and faces were covered in chocolate. And this was all done to show the effectiveness of wet ones. So again, plug in any sort of product you can to get more money. And while recording the perfectly orchestrated brand content, Chad was goofing around, making faces at the camera and supposedly ruining the shot. So Ruby banished him back to the hotel room. However, Chad wasn't going to let his mom ruin his time, so he actually went to a taxi and went back to the park. And then by the time the family returned, Chad was still gone. And this supposedly was the final straw for his parents because they always kind of labeled him as like the troublemaker child of the family. And, you know, in their eyes, he was turning into this like juvenile delinquent, essentially. So Ruby and Kevin were like, all right, we got to fucking do something. He's, you know, out of control. He's entering his teen years and it's
Don't want a troubled teen.
Right, don't want a troubled teen. So they were actually debating on sending him to West Point. And, you know, they also took him to a bunch of therapists. And that's when they found the monster that was Jodi Hildebrandt. Actually, a family friend of the Frankes recommended Jodi as a therapist after attending some of her workshops from ConneXions. ConneXions is like this program that Jodi created, and we talk a lot about this in a previous episode. I'll still kind of mention it and give you the gist so that you understand what it's about. But Jodi, just so you know, she's a licensed therapist.
She was.
She was. But at the time, she was a licensed therapist. And yeah, they found her and they discovered this ConneXions program and they just thought this was perfect. ConneXions was this program that kind of like basically promised to help overcome pretty much any issue that you had, whether that was porn addiction, to defiance, to disordered thinking. And they had 3 strong principles in ConneXions: impeccable honesty, rigorous responsibility, and vulnerable humility. So they committed to weekly one-on-one calls with Jodi and also planned to send Chad away to Anasazi Wilderness Camp for troubled teens. Now, Mile Higher has done an entire episode on the troubled teen industry and those camps. Some of them are so bad. But she basically sold it as this place where he could be sent away to shed his rebellious ways and come back the poster boy of the perfect LDS child. And it wasn't cheap. It was almost $14,000 for 49 days of treatment. But, you know, they didn't question Jodi at all. They thought she was like this all-knowing being that could really like fix her troubled kid. And of course, Ruby filmed Chad getting ready to go to the camp. She explained to the camera that he needed a reset and to mature. This is so fucked up. I can't believe that you would go to the extent to film your fucking kid when you're pinning them as whether they're troubled or not. Let's say that Chad was horribly behaved and had all these problems. Why on earth would you think it's acceptable to film them getting ready and then post it online for content? Like, yeah, my kid's fucked up. He needs to go learn how to get mature, so I'm sending him off to this camp. It's absolutely fucking insane. So yeah, Chad goes to the camp. He comes back and says that, you know, in the end it was fun, and mostly because he didn't have the camera on his face 24/7, and it actually like gave him a sense of freedom that he didn't have at home. So just think about that for a sec.
They're like sent away. They're sleeping outside.
Mm-hmm.
They literally just have like a tent and their sleeping bag. Ruby said that it was so that when he comes back, he could be grateful for what he has.
Yep. Yeah, I know this kid in high school who that happened to, and he was in the mountains for like 2 months, no shower, like learning how to like rough it in the woods, essentially live off the land. And after he got home, Chad went ahead and continued on doing therapy with Jodi. And Shari always got this really unnerving feeling from Jodi. Shari started looking into Jodi and found that her childhood hadn't been the best. Her father was extremely emotionally closed off, and she was interested in the relationship between children and parents. And at one point, Jodi broke patient confidentiality when she accused a client of being an abuser, and she reported him as a sexual predator to BYU and to the church. And this person went to Jodi for help with his marriage, but she ended up really fucking up his life. His wife left him and he was kicked out of the church, and he reported Jodi, and her therapy license was suspended in 2012 as a result, but she continued to practice without a license. But that's a giant red flag, okay? If you are a licensed professional and your license gets taken away because you're breaking confidentiality, major fucking problem. You probably shouldn't be practicing anymore. Shari told Chad that she didn't trust Jodi and to not let her get into his head, because Shari was like, something is wrong with this person, and she was trying to like kind of protect Chad. But Chad ended up telling Ruby about that conversation, and Ruby told Shari that she was sabotaging her brother's progress and that Shari needed help too. So Shari said that she didn't want that, but Ruby had really started drinking the Kool-Aid and, quote, anyone who doesn't like Jodi is hiding something. It means you're threatened by the truth she speaks. So as you can see, Ruby just thinks that Jodi's like this all-knowing genius that can fix everything, never question her. Her way is perfect. And she was so obsessed with ConneXions, and this program is very expensive. As we said before, I'll put up on screen. There's like different programs that you could pay for. There's individual leadership training, team leadership training, company leadership training, and they, range from around $800 to around $15,000 depending on which training you pick, and each training involves different things, etc. And Jodi was making hella money off of this program. Obviously, Shari was spending money, but she wasn't the only one. A lot of people in the community were. And she owned this like giant $5 million mansion.
Huge.
Yeah, it's fucking huge. We'll show videos of it later. Yeah, it's literally a compound. Yeah, we'll watch it later. But yeah, Jodi was raking in the dough. And Ruby was so involved with this that she became a certified ConneXions life coach.
And I think that's how Jodi got around being a licensed therapist. She was no longer a therapist, so she sold herself as a life coach, which you don't need any certification to be a life coach. Anyone can call themselves a life coach. I know that there are trainings and like different programs you can go through to be a life coach, but it's not a clinician of any sort. Okay. So Jodi's playbook focused on isolation and control, which was honestly a lot like a cult. Like ConneXions students were encouraged to distance themselves from anyone not living by Jodi's truth. Members were reliant on each other and really lost all sense of autonomy, which is very much the characteristics of a cult. And they had some very interesting views, such as a woman checking out the mailman counted on as cheating, like basically being like, you can't even look at another man, and a man can't even look at a woman. Like a married man talking to a female coworker could be unfaithful. Looking at attractive people online is classified as porn addiction. Just very extreme views. And Jodi seemed to specialize in guiding wives to kick out their husbands. And ConneXions language framed it as an invitation. Keep this in mind because this is important later on. But she framed it as an invitation for the husband to leave and work on himself for his family. And most of the time, it worked. And, while this is all going on and Chad is deeply invested in ConneXions, Ruby felt like Chad wasn't making the improvements that, she wanted to see in him. So then she took him out of sports, which was very, very hard on him because sports was like the one thing that gave him a purpose. He also was having a, chance of potential scholarship. And it was a really good distraction from his home life. So she stripped him of that. And he really had nothing at this point. It wasn't long before Shari started therapy with Jodi. One evening, Ruby pulled Shari aside and told her that, we're taking you out of track, because she was on track. She was doing sports as well. And Shari was absolutely shocked by this. Ruby told her it was because she wasn't emotionally vulnerable with her and there was a wall between them. Wonder why. And she told Shari she didn't have empathy and wasn't compassionate. Coming from you, bitch. So Ruby said it was hers and Kevin's job to fix Shari's flaws before it was too late. So Shari was told in order to fix these flaws that Ruby and Kevin decided to get her one-on-one sessions with Jodi. And Shari really didn't want to do this, but Ruby gave her two options, either meetings with Jodi or they were going to be taking everything away from her car, phone, pull her out of school, etc. And Shari actually talked about how she looked into emancipation, but she realized that, it wasn't going to work because she really had nowhere else to go. So Shari had weekly calls with Jodi as a part of her weekly routine. And during these sessions, Shari said she was encouraged to open up about her flaws and self-loathing. This part is so fucking weird to me.
It's like backwards.
This is such a non-traditional way to give therapy. But yeah. Jodi made Shari question if she was a good person, and she encouraged Shari to question everything about herself. Jodi encouraged her to self-denigrate instead of being proud of her accomplishments. For example, she told her to think that, quote, she would fail her test because she was a very stupid girl. And Jodi's goal with this exercise was to make Shari feel very vulnerable, which she called living in truth. Because remember, one of the, 3 key pieces to ConneXions is impeccable honesty. As you can imagine, this really started to wear Shari down. She started self-isolating even more than she already was. She was pushing her friends away, the friends that she had. But Shari had finally won Ruby's approval since indoctrinating her into ConneXions. And I can only imagine how confusing that must have been of like, I feel so terrible about myself. However, my mom seems to finally approve of me. So yeah, at this point, Shari is just so dumbfounded how, Ruby was so far up Jodi's ass. Like everything Jodi did, Ruby went with.
Didn't question
it. Literally like stopped parenting herself and was just doing whatever the fuck Jodi told her to do. And Shari, frankly, was fucking fed up. And so she started to rebel. And this is when we're going to talk about this guy named Derek. This was a big part of her story. She's trying to rebel, trying to gain some control over her own life. And so one of the small acts of defiance was her friendship with Derek. She thought their friendship started really innocent, but things with Derek ended up turning into something else, which we will get into. So Derek was someone who was very high up in the church. He was in his 40s, okay? And he was married with children. They started hanging out in May of 2021, right after Shari graduated high school. So huge age gap there. And Derek asked Shari for help with social media strategy for his company and offered her a side gig to help him put YouTube videos together. And Shari said that this really meant a lot to her, that she felt, this very well respected in the community adult like Derek had singled her out and recognized her skills and her talents. And so she was really happy to be involved and try and help him out. So she would meet up with Derek at his office once a week to help him on his social media projects. And she said that for a while she felt very safe around Derek, even though sometimes he would say things that are, a little bit slightly off. Some of his remarks were borderline flirtatious, like, very overdoing with the compliments, overly nice to her. And she said that, when Derek would make these compliments, that it made her feel a little bit uncomfortable, but she would kind of just put those feelings aside because she really reminded herself of his upstanding reputation that he had in the community. So like, obviously he's a great guy, right? So Shari said that every time Derek got her gifts or did something really nice, she felt guilty because he was showing her nothing but kindness, but she still wasn't always sure that she really liked him. But regardless, she, I think, liked working for him and, liked being able to like have this relationship that was outside of her household. Relationship meaning like it wasn't, romantic. He was married with kids. Well, it wasn't romantic yet, I guess you could say.
She referred to it as like a friendship.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So Shari eventually told her mom that she was working with Derek, and Ruby was really pissed off about this. She did not like this at all. And she told Shari that she was no longer allowed to see him anymore. And Ruby continued and said, quote, "I have a really bad feeling about this guy. Jodi and I don't think it's appropriate for you to be working with him one-on-one like that. Tell him you'll have to stop."
She wasn't wrong.
Right. Yeah. I mean, she's correct. But, at this point, Shari's like, why would I trust you? You've screwed me over. You've abused me. You've neglected me. You've harassed me. You've manipulated me and Jodi too. So why the fuck would I listen to her? And so she told her mom that she would stop seeing him, but that was a complete lie. She was 18 at the time and she believed that she was old enough to make her own decisions, which legally she was. And so she continued working with Derek throughout the summer behind her parents' back until it was time for her to leave for college. And like I said, I think it makes sense that she kept working with Derek, despite the fact that he made her feel uncomfortable and he was like kind of being weird towards her. She basically had no control over her life, no autonomy over her life. And having this choice to have this, connection with someone else, I think gave her that sense of freedom and being able to make her own choices and basically kind of allowed herself to be like, fuck you, mom, I'm not going to listen to you, and I'm going to keep doing what I want to do.
And I think that the way she was raised, like not having friends that were boys,
Totally.
it really does skew your perception of men growing up. And this is just like from my own experience. Like I wasn't really allowed to have like guy friends. And now as an adult, like I definitely see how that's affected me.
Mm-hmm.
You're not always like attuned to how those relationships and friendships are supposed to work. She wasn't aware of these like red flags because she had never experienced it.
Exactly.
Well, and she didn't feel any care from her parents or her dad or her mom. And this guy is making her seem like you're doing a great job.
Yeah. She's getting attention
her
from him, and he's older.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Everything she wants in the sense of like a father figure, and also just in general be given any reassurance about herself.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah, he was giving that to her. At this point, the summer's coming to an end, and Shari's preparing to leave for college. And, she had a few weeks left at home when she got a call from Ruby, where she told her, quote, "Jodi's not well. She's being bombarded by the adversary. Her soul is under siege from Satan himself, Shari. He's trying to silence her. So she's moving in with us. We're going to help her get better." So yeah, Jodi's moving in. And where is she staying? In Shari's room. And so now Shari is going to be staying on the couch for the last, few weeks of summer before she left for college. And after Jodi moved in, Shari noticed that there was something going on between her parents and Jodi that seemed very secretive, but she wasn't sure what it was. Like Ruby had mentioned, Jodi was in a very dark place mentally, and night after night, she would fall into mysterious trances that weren't quite seizures or sleep, but something in between, she described. And she said her parents would conduct what they call spiritual interventions for her, and these sessions were supposedly meant to heal her. So let's go ahead and listen to a clip here of Kevin talking about, what started happening when Jodi moved in.
When she showed up in my house, just the weirdest crap started happening. Lights turning on and off, sounds of people walking in walls, stuff floating around, and I became the resident exorcist. Whenever she started to go into a trance and go into possession, which started to be a lot. And Ruby would go up and check on her. It started like every 4 hours at night, and then it moved every 2 hours at night, then it moved every hour at night, and then at some point Ruby said, "You know what, I'm just going to start sleeping in there, and if I need you, I'll come down and get you." I could leave when I wanted, but I couldn't come back until Ruby gave me permission. I couldn't come into the kitchen to eat until Ruby gave me permission. And the upstairs where Jodi roamed was completely off limits. Ruby would dictate all of the terms of how our interactions would be when we would talk. No matter what I did, no matter how much I tried to track better, be, truthful and not be selfish. Every week it was like, "You're being manipulative, you're being selfish, you're lying, you're hiding something, you're still hiding stuff." And I really started to question my sanity, honestly. It became more and more and more and more and more isolated. Jodi had an approved list of men that I could make phone calls to. I felt trapped. And that's where I was all the way up until the last week of July.
So yeah, as you can hear, Ruby decided that it was best for her to bunk up with Jodi so her friend didn't have to go through her, the demonic night terrors all alone. Shari talks about how during this time she basically saw her dad become a real shell of himself. I mean, you can kind of hear it in this interview. And really wasn't doing anything to stop all this fucking craziness. And meanwhile, Jodi and Ruby settled into their upstairs retreat, rarely venturing out except for their occasional ice cream runs to Dairy Queen. And while Jodi was living at the house, her friend Pam, who was also high up in ConneXions, was always stopping by, and the three of them, Ruby, Jodi, and Pam, would shut themselves in Shari's room for hours at a time. And Shari said that she had never seen Ruby happier than when Jodi was living with them. And Ruby, Jodi, and Pam would go on trips together. They went to Mexico all the time and would come back with grocery bags full of pills. And Shari asked Ruby about it, and Ruby claimed that it was all part of their grand plan to stockpile antibiotics for the end days. So obviously, the three of them are becoming very paranoid. and, have all these whack ideas, and they think the devil's there. And I can't even imagine living in this household, truly. So Shari said, and like you kind of heard in the video, that her dad was basically just like left out of this little group that they had going. Kevin was essentially just going along with it. And Ruby told the kids and Kevin that they were not allowed to talk about the fact that Jodi was staying at their house. This was, a big secret. And Shari would go, to Derek's office frequently to help him with his work, mainly so she could get out of the house. She was like so desperate to get away from this fucking strange situation. Derek started really kind of catching on that she was very stressed out about this home situation, and he started to take a close interest in her and how she was feeling, which made her feel more comfortable, which again, I can totally understand. Your home life's a mess. Your parents are acting insane. You have like random people living at your house. There's no sense of normalcy there. And Derek is this person that is, listening to her and seemingly caring about her. And this made her feel a lot more comfortable. And she would confide in him and said that, he always listened to her, allowing her to share the pain and confusion of her family life without any judgment. And, this next part is very strange, but Shari talks about this time when she got back from working with Derek late at night. And when she walked into the house, she said that the house was like really quiet. And that, she was wanting to go upstairs to her room because there were some books in her room that she wanted to get. And so she said that she went upstairs, and when she opened the bedroom door, the room was filled with lit candles. And there was like this really heavy scent of lavender and vanilla coming from these like massage oils that were there. And she said that it felt like she had walked into a honeymoon suite. And around 5 a.m., she heard footsteps up. So like she left the room. She goes back downstairs to her couch. And then the next morning at around 5 a.m., she heard footsteps. And when she looked up, she saw Ruby tiptoeing out of Shari's room, which, mind you, is the room that Jodi is sleeping in. And she goes back to the primary bedroom. And she said that, Ruby's hair was all messy, her cheeks were flushed, and her robe was loosely tied, and she had a weird smile on her face. Shari was so confused about what was going on and also felt really bad for her dad because he was seemingly like totally oblivious to what was happening. And there's this one part in the book that she says, quote, "It was equal parts fascinating and horrific. Two women who preached truth while living lies, who condemned queerness very publicly in their ConneXions videos while embodying it privately in my room, on my bed, most likely." Okay, so the end of summer's here. Shari is just waiting for school to start, and she finally goes off to college at BYU and was planning to major in political science. And she said, it was only a 10-minute drive from the home, but at this point, she's just psyched to get the hell out of there at any point that she can. And Shari's parents went with her to help move her into the dorm, and of course, it was all caught on camera to be uploaded to the 8 Passengers channel. And Shari said when her parents left, she had this weird feeling of freedom, but also wasn't used to like the silence. She was alone. She could do whatever she wanted. The house was chaotic normally, and now it's quiet. She's alone. But of course, it wasn't long before Derek reached out to see her. So we're going to get into this next section here, what is about Derek. Trigger warning, it's very disturbing. If you want to skip forward, you can. It'll still makes, you can still follow along afterwards. This part is just very disturbing. So if you want to skip forward, there's always timestamps in the description. So Shari is in her dorm room. She's by herself, and she gets this text from Derek asking how it felt to be free. And if, she wanted to come by his office later so he could give her the back to school gifts that he had for her. And so she agrees to go to his office, but on the drive over, she starts feeling really, really unwell. She's talking about how her vision was blurry, her chest was really tight. She had just this very uneasy, nervous feeling. And when she got there, she told Derek that she was actually having a panic attack. And Derek's like, "It's okay, come onto my couch, lay down, it's all good." He actually says, quote, "Shari, listen to me. I think skin-to-skin contact will help you calm down. Can I take your shirt off?" She says, "I froze, my mind reeling. No," I thought, no. But my mouth wouldn't work. The words stuck in my throat. I shook my head, tried to push him away, but he was stronger than me. His grip iron tight around my wrists. "Trust me," he murmured, his breath hot against my ear. "Just let me help you, Shari." And then his hands were on me, rough and insistent, yanking my shirt up, exposing my bra, my skin. I squirmed, I fought, but it was useless. He was bigger than me, stronger than me. And the more I struggled, the more powerless I felt. "See," he said, "it's not so bad. Now just relax for me. Be a good girl." His hands roamed over my back, my stomach snaked up to cut my breasts through the thin fabric of my bra. I felt myself go numb, felt my mind detach from my body, floating up and away until I was looking down at the scene from above, a girl on a couch, a man looming over her, his hands possessive and greedy. This was the first time someone had touched me like this. It couldn't be me. It couldn't be happening. Not to me. "That feels better, doesn't it?" he asked, and I heard myself say yes, heard my voice, small, distant, agreeing with him. I don't know how I made it back to my dorm that night. All I know is that when I finally collapsed onto my bed, I couldn't move, I couldn't think, I couldn't feel. So she gets back to her dorm room, and she receives all these texts from fucking Derek, being like, "Where are you? Why aren't you answering? Is everything okay?" And she talks about how, she says, "I stared at the screen, my heart pounding, my mind reeling. He's worried," I thought guiltily. I should get back to him so he doesn't get more upset. With trembling fingers, I typed out a response. "I'm okay. How are you?" The reply was instant. "Are you talking to any boys?" I frowned, confused. "No," I typed back. "Good," came the response. "Thank you," I typed, not knowing what else to say. Which, by the way, she narrates this book.
Yes.
In Audible, if you want to listen to it. But there are truly no fucking words. After everything that she had been through in her own family, she meets this guy who she thinks is a decent guy that actually gives a shit about her, that gives her the time of day, that gives her attention, that makes her feel loved, it makes her feel understood, listens to her. And for it to end up like that is just...
She's like in her most vulnerable state.
Right.
And then he just used it for his own benefit. Just horrible.
Disgusting human. Shari said that after this happened, she had like no one to talk to about this. She said that she felt ashamed and guilty, and Derek became really possessive and was like constantly reaching out to her. One day, Shari was enjoying a day out with a guy from class at the campus creamery, just having some ice cream, when she got a text from Derek asking where she was, and she decided to respond truthfully, telling him I'm with this guy getting some ice cream. He goes, "Oh, you're with a boy? You don't care about me anymore. That's not very nice." Oh, the manipulation is just despicable. She knew that she, should have kept her distance from Derek after what happened, but there was this part of her that clung to the attention that he gave her, which I can understand how that would be. And when she thought about how her father was completely absent in her life and compared to Derek's like intense focus on her, it felt very validating. And, she was willing to put up with it, even if, that came with strings attached. So things with Derek had escalated physically. Derek told Shari that he was training her for marriage and showing her the things she would need to do to pleasure her future husband. Ugh. And, moving forward a bit here, Shari shared some details from Christmas that year. This is so fucking sad, you guys. Okay, so she's at school. She comes home from college. She gets home and Chad greets her at the door and said, "Hey sis, welcome to hell." And Ruby and Kevin decided that year that the two youngest siblings would not be given gifts for Christmas. Instead, they would be receiving the gift of love from their mom and dad, which obviously the gift of love is wonderful. But the way that she describes this, which we'll play here in a second, because of course it's vlogged, is so fucking backwards. And also, so the two younger kids who don't have any gifts are watching the older kids get gifts and opening them. And then the two younger ones had to clean up their wrapping paper after they were done. It's like so ridiculous. So let's go ahead and watch this clip of Ruby explaining the decision.
We have 6 children. The 2 youngest are showing long patterns of selfishness through their choices, their unwillingness to repent, their unwillingness to feel sorrow over some pretty egregious choices that they've made. Kevin and I have decided that we are going to give the gift of truth to them this year for Christmas. We are going to give them the gift of boundaries, and we're going to give them the gift of repentance. So we sat down with them and we told these two what our expectations were again. And we let them know how deeply sorrowful we've been because of the choices that they've been making, laid it out very clear. And we told them that this year they are not going to be visited by Santa. So they will, and we prepped them. We let them know that Christmas morning, their 4 older siblings will be getting Christmas presents to open, and that they will have the gift of love from their dad and I. We want them to really have a visceral experience that hits them.
So yeah, Santa's coming to the older kids, but not you guys, because y'all suck this year. So you're not getting shit, but you can clean up after the kids. So now what was left out of Ruby's clip here was that Jodi had a very large part in this. So I'm going to go ahead and read this other part from the book. We're teaching them not to be selfish and entitled. Furthermore, they must ask permission before speaking to any of you. If they interrupt, you must reprimand them. This is non-negotiable. We all need to present a united front to correct their behavior. So don't talk to them. So moving forward a little bit here, Shari talks about how her dad was essentially kicked out of the house, which this doesn't really come to a surprise considering that he's basically banned from going upstairs. He can't go in the kitchen, whatever. So at the time, Shari was at one of her high school teachers' houses, and they were known as the Haymans because Shari was friends with Mrs. Hayman's daughter, and they were kind enough to open up their house to Shari and let her stay with them whenever she wanted. But at one point, she was at the Haymans' house when she got a call from her dad, and Kevin drops this bomb and says, "Your mom has invited me to leave the family home so I can work on myself." Remember, we talked about that exact verbiage earlier. "Once I'm better, I'll come back and we can be a happy family again. I'll be gone for at least a year." And then she says, "You're moving out of the house, leaving the kids?" And Kevin sighed heavily and said, "Yes, I'm leaving, taking Chad with me. And, Chad is also selfish, and I guess selfish people belong together. I don't want you to end up like me, Shari. Maybe this can be a learning experience for you." And then Kevin dropped another bombshell. He says that he wouldn't be communicating with the other kids, only me, meaning only Shari. And he said, "How are you feeling about all of this, Shari?" "Confused," I said, "really, really confused." And he said, "I understand, but this isn't the end of our family, it's the beginning." And the next morning, she says, "I woke up to the buzz of my phone, this time a lengthy text from Kevin. Shari, things have changed, and Chad and I are going to ask that you don't contact either of us until we're ready and reach out to you. Please don't contact me, don't be selfish about this, and don't hold resentment for this. Use this time to get close to your mom and your siblings." And after receiving this news of her dad, and Chad leaving, Shari started staying at the Haymans, in their guest room for days because she was clearly so distraught over this. And she described the guest room of the Haymans kind of like her cocoon. And, she was so confused. How could someone sink their teeth so far into Ruby that Ruby is now convinced that her own husband and son should leave the family? Jodi is truly a master manipulator. So a week later, Shari got a text from Ruby asking how she was coping, and Shari made it very clear that she was not coping well with the situation, and Ruby's response was very dismissive. She suggested that this was an opportunity for everyone to become humbler, adding, "Especially you, Shari." So by the time that sophomore year came, Shari was living off campus in a cramped, mold-infested 2-bedroom apartment with 2 other girls. And it was during this time that she learned from neighbors back at home that Chad was not living with Kevin, as she had assumed, because for all she knew, the 2 of them were off living together. And she was super surprised by this, and she really was determined to figure out where the hell her brother was. So she reached out to a former neighbor who was a landlord in Provo near her own apartment that she was living at, hoping that he could provide some more information. And while he confirmed that Chad was renting one of his properties, he declined to share the specific unit number. But he did end up texting her the address and then saying Building 6, apartment 38. So
yeah, but the only thing is it's pretty obvious that the text was from him, but at first he's like, "I can't give you that information." And then it was like they hung up, and then a little bit later, she got a text from a random number.
Right.
Yeah, but it's also like, it's clearly,
it's obviously
him. Yeah.
He just couldn't do it legally.
Right, exactly, because you can't give someone their address.
Right, yeah.
But I think he probably figured out, like, oh, this is so.
And I think like it was pretty well known in like the neighborhood, in like Ruby's neighborhood specifically, that something was going on with the family. Like,
oh, yeah.
The neighbors were all really concerned.
Definitely.
The neighbors were reaching out to Shari, and like giving her updates and stuff. So I think it was pretty obvious that something was extremely wrong with this family.
Yes, for sure. So Shari went ahead and goes to this address, and sure enough, Chad was there. And, she asked to talk to him, expressing how much she had missed him. But Chad really remained very cold and distant. And Shari was so hurt and confused by like why he was acting like this towards her. And he was being like very loyal to Ruby, and she didn't understand why, because she essentially kicked him out of his own fucking house. And then the conversation abruptly ended, and Chad told Shari she should leave and went back into his apartment, slamming the door behind him. And not long after, Shari received a text from Ruby confirming that Chad had shared their conversation with her. So this text reads, "Shari, you have been deceiving me for quite some time. This makes sense now why you didn't want to talk to me. You can handle the duplicity. It's clear to me that you are not interested in being a part of our family, and you have chosen to disconnect by sneaking around, attempting to harm other members of our family. I feel great grief and loss at your choices. I will honor your agency of disconnect. Disconnection means you are not interested in being around me and the family. You don't get to disconnect emotionally and tell stories about your mother, and then get the perks of familial and financial connection that I provide. It has come to my attention that you call me, quote, abusive. Wow, Shari, that word is heavily loaded with intimation. It is hurtful you would use that word knowing the pain that this lie has caused. This is my way of being very loving in inviting you to see the reality you are in. You don't get to use me or any member of my family. When you are willing to humble yourself and acknowledge your aggression and deception, I am open to talking to you. I will keep you in my prayers. You appear to be a very lost soul. You don't even know where the enemy is. Your arrogance has kept you from heeding my warnings. Love, Ruby." I can't imagine getting that. God, she is the biggest manipulator ever. So after she gets this message, she's absolutely distraught. So she goes to the Haymans, and as soon as she got there, she started receiving texts from Derek, questioning why she was over there. And again, Shari started to think that maybe she was actually overstaying her welcome. She started being like, oh my God, am I at the Haymans too much? Do they really want me here? Am I being too needy? But the Haymans tried, everything they could to like really reassure her that she was not a burden on them, that they actually considered her a part of the family. And this made Shari so sad, because this was what she had always like longed for. She had never really known what it felt like to actually have unconditional love. She said, I could feel the tears welling up in my eyes, the lump rising in my throat. Is this what it feels like? I thought, my heart swelling with a fierce, aching love. Is this what it's like to have people in your life who actually care about you? So fucking sad. So at this point, that text that she had received from Ruby was weighing very heavily on her heart. Something hits her and she realizes, like, holy shit, Ruby has access to my bank account. And she was really scared that Ruby was going to potentially like empty her account at any moment. So she decided to transfer everything from that shared account to a new one with only her name on it. And Shari knew that as soon as Ruby realized that she had done this, that there would be some type of retaliation. And sure enough, she was right, because she received an email first thing the next morning from the family's insurance agent. It said, Shari, your mother has asked me to remove you from the family's car insurance policy. Effective immediately, you will need to secure your own coverage. Please do not drive until you have done so. And this was like a whole other debacle, because she needed to get the title in order to switch over the insurance. However, Ruby's the one that had like the physical title. It was at her house. Obviously, she doesn't want to fucking go to her house. So Ruby actually told Shari that Pam would have the title and that she needed to coordinate with her to get it. Remember, Pam is Ruby and Jodi's friend. So when Shari went to Pam's house to get the title, she was bombarded by Ruby. Ruby was there. She wasn't supposed to be there. At least, Shari didn't know that she was going to be there, but she's there. And it's at this point that they have their last interaction. Prior to this happening, Ruby saw Shari's Instagram post. So basically, Shari had made an Instagram post because by this point, people online were speculating that something was going on. Reddit was blowing up, the internet was spreading rumors, and it was no secret that things were not well at the Franke household. And so she shared this Instagram post that said, it was on her story, and she said, "I know that there are many rumors circulating online about my family. While it is true, I am not in contact with my immediate family and don't support the extreme beliefs of ConneXions, please remember that this is my real family. Despite good intentions, speculating, rumors, and gossip doesn't help us. I'd like to ask for privacy for me and my family as we work through this very difficult situation. Please know that many are working on this situation, and I hope one day that we can be whole again. Please respect my privacy as I work through my own healing as well." So Ruby saw that she had put this online. It pisses her off. And so Ruby said, can you basically promise to not talk about this anymore on social media? And Shari was just like, no, not going to promise that. And that was the last time that she spoke to her before the arrest. Now, meanwhile, this is happening kind of in the background. All these other events are going on, but Shari was actually in contact with DCFS because at one point she got a call from a neighbor who informed her that her siblings had been left alone for 5 days while Ruby was off with Jodi doing God fucking knows what. Shari was absolutely furious with this, and so she called DCFS, which is Division of Child and Family Services, and requested a welfare check on the children. And police actually went to the house, knocked on the door, and looked through the windows, but then later informed her that the kids were there, and apparently everything seemed fine. And while she was obviously relieved that her siblings were okay, she was super frustrated with the lack of action from DCFS. She was basically being like, how can you leave minors for 5 days without this being some type of, law that's being broken? And of course, somehow Ruby found out that Shari was the one who called DCFS, and as you could imagine, this really pissed off Ruby because now Shari is essentially trying to call authorities on her, being like, go check on my fucking siblings because my mom is God knows where and my dad's not allowed to be home. And yeah, Shari, didn't know how Ruby figured it out, but it was clear that she was fucking pissed and she wanted revenge. So at this point, Shari and Derek are still in contact, and this is when their relationship really, the abuse really started to eat at her, and she knew that she needed to get out of this situation that she was in with Derek. And it was the morning of her birthday, and she sent her Aunt Julie a text that she needed to talk to her and her husband about something. So Shari said she left her phone at her apartment because she didn't want Derek to know where she was going.
So they did share locations, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm sure they did because
otherwise
she's such a controlling freak.
He did ask her for it.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Because he wanted to know, because he wanted to keep her safe.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
I remember hearing about that. Okay. She's like, okay, I have to leave my phone here because if he knows that I went somewhere, he's going to check it and be like, what the fuck, where are you? So anyways, she shares her story about Derek to her aunt and uncle, and luckily they were very understanding of the situation. And then after this, Shari went back to her apartment to grab her phone and then went right back to her aunt's house because she didn't want to be alone. And lo and behold, Derek is flooding her phone with a bunch of text messages asking her where she was, what was wrong. And she finally replied, letting him know that she was spending the day at her aunt's house. And Derek then suggested that, let's go out to dinner for your birthday. But Shari didn't respond to him. And then 30 minutes later, she noticed his fucking car parked outside of her aunt's house. The disgusting creep that he is. And she said that this was totally the breaking point. She mustered up the courage to officially end the relationship. And she texted Derek, I'm done. It's over. I want you to leave me alone forever. And he responded telling her she never cared about him. But thankfully, Shari stood firm, insisting that it absolutely had to stop and that, you are to never contact me ever again. And then she blocked his number immediately after. So good for her for doing that and getting out of that situation. Sicko. So by this point, she's still calling DCFS. And pretty much for the most part, it's not really leading anywhere. And I'll tell you why. It's because Utah, which other states have this law too, but it's called the Free Range Parenting Law. This was actually passed in 2018 in Utah, and this law is basically intended to protect parents who promote like independence in their children. So it allows for kids to like play outside by themselves or walk to school alone and have unsupervised playtime. And so because of that law, it's very gray. Like the DCFS really didn't do a whole lot. And, you know, she continues to call them. And she was at this time like trying to study child abuse laws herself and search for like legal avenues to protect her siblings, like trying to figure out some way that she could take action and have the authorities actually do something about it. And then at this point, people are starting to catch on, okay? There's so many rumors online, and it's to the point where YouTube gets a hold of this. And on August 2nd, 2023, the channel got shut down. And at this point, it had around 2.5 million subscribers and 1 billion views. That's great. And yeah, so the channel gets shut down. And then a couple weeks later, she gets this call from her neighbor on August 30th, 2023. And this is when the whole fucking thing breaks loose. It was a Wednesday. The neighbor said the words, "Shari, the police are at your mother's house." And so the police are there, but they don't find anyone at the Franke house, but got some news that the two youngest children, Russel and Eve, were found. And how, you ask? Which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this at this point, because this was huge news. And obviously we had covered a lot of this back then, but there's definitely some new info. But basically, Russel was at Jodi's house, and he somehow escaped, and he goes to this neighbor's house and asks for help. And he rings the doorbell, and the neighbor's talking to him through the doorbell. Let's go ahead and just watch this clip.
And then,
Yeah. Hi, I was wondering if you could do 2 favors. Well, what are they? Taking me to the nearest police station. Actually, just one's fine.
What's going on, sir? Have a seat there.
It's personal business.
Boy, has been. This kid has obviously been. I think he's been detained. He's obviously covered in wounds. He says what's happened to him is his fault.
We need the police here as well.
So as you can hear from that, Russel goes to the door, asks the neighbor to call the police. He basically tells him, like, this kid is at my door. He has wounds on his legs. And yeah, the police show up.
where Jodi lived, it looked like the desert. No houses nearby, so Russel had to walk pretty far.
Yeah. It wasn't like a, typical residential house where your houses are like right next to each other. She's on like this fucking compound. The police get to Jodi's house. They end up arresting both Jodi and Ruby. Eve, who was also at Jodi's house, was found there. Thankfully, they were able to save her and, bring her in as well. So let's go ahead and watch some footage of the arrests, and just kind of, some police body cam footage.
I need you to step out.
I have my attorney.
That's great. Step out of the house.
He's like, I don't give a fuck. Get out of the house.
She had a phone in her hand.
Whoa.
We're just going to stay the officer.
Just have a seat right there for me.
Do you have a search warrant?
I'll explain it after this. We were
Looking for the other children. Clear the hall. Yep.
Just over 10,000 square feet.
Take the hall. Okay. Sure. You got it.
This home has multiple bedrooms, bathrooms, hallways.
Wait. Come on, baby. I'm a police officer. Hey, you okay? Is it just you in here? It's okay if I just sit here with you. We don't have to say anything. If you don't want to. No room back here.
We found rope, we found handcuffs. It was really set up like a private room.
It's huge, holy shit.
You can see like how far
More
it is
than
from
4
the
hours
buildings.
after police make entry into Jodi's home, E finally agrees to leave the closet. While E is led to the ambulance, Jodi Hildebrandt is placed in a secure room in the house. That's when the children's mother arrives at the home.
Okay, just place your hand behind your back for me.
So yeah, you can see she's put in the cop car and she's taken down to the station to get an interview. And let's watch some footage of that.
Do you live down here or? Or do you live up north?
I'm not saying anything.
Do you want to talk to me about where you live or how many kids you have? You don't want to talk to us about anything?
So yeah, this is just your chance to tell us. We're just trying to get your side of the story. So it's your chance to do that. But it's up to you.
I'll wait till I have a lawyer. Okay. So you can talk to us at all.
So the kids are in very rough shape. And we had talked about this in one of our previous episodes when this all first happened, but just kind of as a reminder, or if maybe this is the first time you're hearing about it, the search warrant records state that Russel appeared to be emaciated and was abnormally thin and weak when the officers had arrived, and he had duct tape on him, and underneath the duct tape, first responders found open wounds, which the boys said they, seeming like to reference Ruby and Jodi, had used cayenne pepper and honey to treat these open wounds. Yeah, the kids were not in good shape, but luckily they were alive and were able to, be saved and taken to safety. So after Ruby was arrested, Shari actually went back to the house to grab a few things. And while she was there, she found one of her mom's laptops. And she said that she was able to easily guess the password and get in. And that's when she started reading these text messages and emails and journal entries in her mom's notes app. And this is when she really learned the truth about the, nature of Ruby and Jodi's relationship and how it spilled over into a physical relationship, because obviously she had speculated it and had that one experience when they were upstairs in the room with the fucking massage oil and the candles. But Shari read a note where Ruby was expressing frustration about having to cater to Jodi's needs for physical attention without getting anything in return. So she says, I read some text messages, emails, and journal entries in the Notes app that confirmed for me the truth about the nature of her relationship with Jodi and how it had spilled over into the physical. Ruby expressing her frustration about having to cater towards Jodi's needs for physical attention without getting anything in return. My mother servicing someone else, first time for everything. And speaking of journal entries, the police found a bunch of journal entries from, Ruby's journal, and they're quite disturbing. Here's one where she calls her kids spawns of Satan. This is dated July 23rd, 20,203. I'm assuming she meant 2023. Sunday. To begin a separation from evil toward God, all the darkness needs exposed to light. And once the lies and sin is revealed, the body must engage in good work. And the good work needs to be painful. Otherwise, the service becomes another feel-good distraction. A day of fasting and prayer for me, after learning my children have been spawns of Satan. Russel has been out, which in these they call them REE, they abbreviate them. So it says R has been out of control. P, poop, lie, steal, run away. E, crying, wailing, you could not know what it has been like unless you were there. Jodi and I took E out to the desert. She refused to stay quiet and would scream and scream. Jodi found a reservation cemetery. She went out in the heat. Barefoot, E still tried to run. She screamed for another family, water, food, care, and love. Oh, Eve, a manipulative ploy. You are loved. So yeah, being my kids are spawns of Satan. They're begging for a family and for water and food. Oh, silly Eve. It's disgusting. So initially, when this all starts, unfolding, the two of them are arrested, Ruby was really defending Jodi, but she quickly changed sides when she saw that pleading guilty and testifying against Jodi could help her situation out. And Ruby tried to present herself as a victim of Jodi's manipulative influence during the abuse of her children. Let's go ahead and watch that clip.
The most upsetting thing is that I am completely misunderstood. That is the most horrible feeling. Like my own family misunderstands me. They misinterpret me. And poor Jodi, they misinterpret her. They misunderstand her. She puts her neck out on the line for people and then they manage her. I mean, it is just horrendous. It's horrendous. And you know what? Every Joseph Smith, every wonderful man of God has had to be misunderstood. And I'm a good woman. I don't do naughty things. This is a witch hunt.
This next clip that we're going to watch is Jodi speaking on the situation.
And I don't know if I'm going to be like some kind of example, but when I get out of here, I have a story to tell, and I'm going to try to do everything I can to protect the children, because that's what's happening, is that kids are being just horribly abused. So I have just been begging him, like, God, to explain this to me. Like, I cannot logically figure out what's going on here. I mean, I should be here. I haven't done anything wrong.
So Ruby starts to try and, change her, the narrative and her behavior in jail, because Utah is one of those states that's very pushing for justice reform and emphasizing like rehabilitation rather than just throwing someone in jail and punishing them. So Ruby thought it would be a good idea to try and like use that to her advantage. So she goes ahead and like shows some remorse. She tries to keep a low profile and is hoping that being on good behavior would let her get early release. And so on February 20th, 2024, Ruby made this statement in front of the judge before she and Jodi were sentenced. Yeah, it's hard to understand exactly what she's saying, but I think like even if you can't catch every word, you can understand the gist of like her tone of voice.
Make a statement without any intent to change my stipulated sentence. For the past 4 years, I've chosen to follow counsel and guidance that has led me into a dark delusion. My distorted version of reality went largely unchecked, as I would isolate from anyone who challenged me. I was led to believe that this world was an evil place, filled with cops who control, hospitals that injure, government agencies that brainwash, church leaders who lie and lust, husbands who refuse to protect, and children who need abused. My choice to believe and behave this paranoia culminated into criminal activity for which I stand before you today ready to take accountability. Jodi Hildebrandt was never my business partner, nor was I ever employed by her. I have never received wages from her or ConneXions. Jodi was employed as my son's counselor in 2019, and in 2020 I paid her. It's important to me to demonstrate my remorse and regret without blame. I take full accountability for my choices, and it is my preference that I'll serve a prison sentence. To my babies, my 6 little chicks, you're a part of me. I was the mama duck who was consistently watering them to safety.
Then on November 30th, Kevin went ahead and moved back into the family home and filed for divorce. And Kevin has not been charged in relation to this case. His legal team assured that he separated from Ruby over a year before she was arrested and claimed he had no knowledge of this abuse. And let's go ahead and watch this interview that he has with police after Ruby was arrested.
A phone call from 911. A 12 to 13-year-old boy was knocking on doors in the neighborhood asking for food and water. He had duct tape on his extremities, on his hands, on his ankles, and those were covering rope burns that were used to tie him down. That's the condition of your son.
Why is he not like freaking the fuck out?
I know, it's bizarre.
By the Department of Child and Family Services to remove both Russel and Eve from your wife's care. Do you understand that?
I understand.
Would you condone that behavior?
Would I condone that behavior?
It's an automatic no.
Again, I don't know the details, or I don't know, but as you described that sounds
horrible, disgusting. No human being should be treated like that.
What's going to happen? It's my wife. I love my wife.
I don't know. I'm being honest with you, I don't know. And if
I get on those charges against my wife.
Possibly. I can tell you're caught off guard.
I thought I was just coming here to pick up the kids, and for what, I don't know what or why. And what you're sharing with me just feels like a sucker punch. I feel responsible. Separating, leaving. It hurts. I know you're all doing your jobs. But I know you all have the best interests of my kids in mind. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Thanks. That means a lot.
I just want my kids back. I want my family back. I want my wife back.
I think that's really bizarre that he seemingly had no idea this was going on and reacts like that.
Okay, also, how, like, the neighbors reached out to Shari how many times to tell?
Right.
Like, did he... I just have a hard time... I mean, obviously, there's no proof if they did, but, like, maybe they tried to reach out to him? I don't know.
All right, so then on February 20th, 2024, both Ruby and Jodi were sentenced to 4 consecutive prison terms, which could range from 1 to 15 years each. So anywhere between 4 to 60 years in prison, which, in my opinion, let them rot forever. In August of 2024, Shari received a letter from Ruby in prison, and the letter was 5 pages long. But Shari kind of just said that the letter really didn't have that much substance. Like 2 of the pages were devoted to describing her nursery, like kind of like reminiscing essentially. And she said that it was like a very glazed over version of how she was so excited preparing for her firstborn child, like choosing the colors and the decor, random shit, nothing relevant of what was going on. It honestly seemed like she was just trying to like guilt her. And convinced like, oh, I'm not a bad mom. Like I was excited to decorate your nursery. So yeah, Shari said that there was no apology for the pain that Ruby had caused her and her siblings, nor did she acknowledge the reason that she was in prison. Instead, Ruby expressed regret for not spending more time with Shari before she moved out for college. Shari said that the Ruby who wrote this letter seemed to exist in a delusional reality, as if the relationship could be fixed with reminiscing about baby blankets and wall colors. It's like, just take some fucking credit or don't say anything at all.
Accountability.
Yeah, sorry. I'm so flustered. Take some accountability or don't write anything at all. She like totally ignored all the actual pain and abuse that she put Shari through and all of the actual reasons that they were driven apart. And she says in the book, in the end, the letter merely reinforced my opinion of Ruby. Even now, behind bars, she still couldn't or wouldn't acknowledge the deeper wounds, the years of emotional manipulation, the public exploitation of our family life, the shocking harm inflicted on my youngest siblings. The question was, why? She talks about that this whole idea of like narcissism. She was really a true narcissist. And Shari talks about what real narcissism is, because I think a lot of people just throw that term around. And she described it as, you know, you got a self-centered boss, narcissist. That friend who always makes it about them, narcissist. That relative who dominates every family gathering, narcissist. But not every self-centered act is a sign of a personality disorder. Sometimes people are just having a bad day, or maybe they're just garden variety jerks. True narcissistic personality disorder is a complex and serious condition that goes far beyond being self-centered or difficult. It's a pervasive pattern of grandiosity, need for admiration, and lack of empathy that can cause significant problems in many areas of the disordered person's life. And Shari talks about how Ruby didn't really choose to be a narcissist. It was like a form of survival, as instinctive and necessary as breathing. And she talks more about narcissism, saying that extreme narcissistic behavior isn't about asserting superiority, It's about compensating for the fact that you actually feel fundamentally flawed and empty inside. I think I've talked about this before, but I mean, narcissists typically actually have very low self-esteem and self-worth, and are trying to overcompensate for that. And I just want to make this clear that obviously not every person with narcissistic personality disorder is as evil and repulsive as a human as Ruby is. And Shari says that she's not 100% sure how, her mom developed these behaviors, but she says that Ruby might have learned, as a kid that being quote unquote good and perfect was the only way to be loved. And, that makes sense considering this seemed to be a reoccurring theme of Ruby's expectations within her own kids. And she goes more into detail about learning about narcissism and how it helped her process the impact of her mom on her life. She said it was no excuse, but behind all of Ruby's manipulation, there was a deeply wounded person who never learned how to connect with others in a healthy way. And she says, realizing your own mother was incapable of truly seeing you, of loving you for who you are, rather than as an extension of herself, is a bitter pill to swallow. It's the death of a fundamental childhood hope. The one where if you just try hard enough, mommy will love you unconditionally. But in a strange way, this understanding has also been incredibly liberating. I now know that I could never be good enough or perfect enough to make Ruby truly happy or proud. The insatiable void I was trying to fill wasn't created by me, and it wasn't mine to fix. That realization, as painful as it is the first step on the path to healing for me, if not for her. Sometimes I find myself tumbling down the rabbit hole of what ifs. What if Ruby hadn't felt like motherhood was the only path to fulfillment? What if she'd been encouraged to explore all facets of herself beyond what her family told her was right for someone born a woman? I think that a lot of people can relate to this in the sense of when you're going through someone or someone has really hurt you or whether it has to do with someone else or not. I think trying to make sense of why they acted this way, obviously it doesn't excuse it, but I think it can kind of help you come to some closure in a sense, because you're not just laying there awake at night wondering like, how the fuck did this happen? Why did this happen? And of course, I think that those beliefs and those thoughts are still there to some degree, but I could see how, by educating yourself on narcissism and narcissists and really understanding what that means, that it would give you some type of closure and real understanding as to why, Ruby is the way that she is. So yeah, Ruby never went to trial. She actually says, one of the reasons I did not go to trial is because I did not want them, being her kids, to emotionally relive the experience, which would have been detrimental to them. My hope and prayer is that they will heal and move forward to have beautiful lives. I don't believe that for one fucking second. But I guess, in a sense, it is a good thing that she didn't go to trial, because those kids would have just dragged on for so long, and those kids,
everything would have been out there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So as of September 2024, the Franke's 4 underage children, because remember there's 6 of them, but 4 of them are still underage, are part of an ongoing juvenile court case in Provo, Utah, and the case is closed to the public, which I think is a good thing. I think that these kids have been through enough, have been publicized enough that they deserve to just be in private now. And it's still, we're not sure how much time they will actually serve. The Utah Board of Pardons and Parole will decide exactly how long each woman will be in prison. And Ruby and Jodi were originally scheduled to go before the board in September of 2024, but the date was actually pushed to December of 2026, so not for a while. And in the meantime, Ruby and Jodi's cases will return to court for restitution hearings. Now, regarding Kevin, Shari writes that she forgave her father, saying, quote, I would never forget the pain he had caused, ignored, and enabled. He had not been absolved, but I had chosen to release the burden of resentment I held against him. In extending a hand of compassion and understanding, I was granting myself the freedom to heal. So it sounds like she's not saying like, oh, my dad had no idea, like he's totally innocent. Charlie!
Oh my God!
Charlie just fell off the table because he was rolling around in his little bed. Come here, baby bear. It's fine. If you're listening, he's totally fine. He landed like on the seat 6 inches below it. So yeah, it sounds like she's not totally saying, oh, my dad had no idea.
Oh,
He's
gonna
totally
have to make it.
Charlie lay down. Okay. You know, she's not like, he had no idea. You know, he's totally innocent in this. But I think she's basically saying like, I'm never going to forgive him, or I would never, you know, forget the pain that he basically allowed and enabled to happen. But she is essentially saying like, I'm choosing to release that burden and not have resentment towards him anymore. I think that's, you know, really big of her and probably for the best to allow herself to continue to heal. So since all this happened, Shari has been very vocal about her concerns of family vlogging, which we have talked about many times on the show. Yeah, I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done in the world of family vlogging. Shari actually in October of 2024 spoke to lawmakers in Utah advocating for more protections for child influencers. And in her opening statement, she told the committee her goal was, quote, not to present any idea of a solution to this problem, but to shed light on the ethical and monetary issues that come from being a child influencer. She talked about how family vlogging is very comparable to family businesses, but the difference between family vlogging and a family business are that all the children are the employees, which, yep, it's pretty crazy. Like, those 6 kids were a huge reason that they had so much success in their channel. I mean, they were the content for years. The thumbnails, the titles, the clickbait, you know.
You think anyone would watch if it was just Kevin and
Right,
Ruby?
right. Like, yeah, there's some like couples who just vlog their life and that's fine, whatever, but
Did you guys ever watch any 8 Passengers when they were?
no, I
vlogging?
honestly didn't even know who they were.
Me neither.
I'd never heard of them.
I had seen like a couple clips of them, but I was never really into like family vloggers like that because like I mean I never really had to care about like family dynamics like that.
Yeah.
Especially at that age. But I remember like coming across a couple of their videos like from time to time, and I'd watch them. They were always just so bizarre. Nobody like batted an eye about any of this until now, which I mean the kids are all older and like, you know, they can speak for themselves now.
Yeah.
But it's just a bizarre era of YouTube.
For sure. What's so, you know, as we come to a close here, the thing that's so crazy for me to wrap my mind around is, for the most part, while all of this horrible abuse and neglect was happening, they were on camera and uploading videos for the world to watch. And behind closed doors, all this shit is going on. And obviously a lot of the shit was public too and being filmed, but you know, no one really knew how bad it was behind closed doors.
It wasn't.
Meanwhile, they're like smiling and supposed to like act fine for the camera.
It wasn't until Chad was talking about sleeping on the bean bag,
right,
that like anybody really had an idea of what was happening.
Yeah. At one point, he got his bed taken away and had to sleep in a fucking beanbag as a punishment for months. Months
for like pranking his brother or something like that.
Yeah, and like of course she's filming him like, this is what you get for having bad behavior. So anyways, to wrap things up here, I want to just kind of talk about Shari for a moment. She is 21 years old and she is attending college at BYU still. And recently on December 28th, she posted on Instagram saying that she is now engaged, and I'm really happy for her. I really hope that, you know, she's with someone who's super wonderful and that she's able to continue to heal from this and try and move on and find some, you know, normalcy in her life. Her caption says, "I'm excited to share that I'm engaged. However, for me, this is the end of me sharing my private life. I've had my voice and agency taken for so long, and now I'm putting my foot down. I'm not going to talk about my wedding, future husband, or future kids. I'll continue to advocate for kids who didn't have a voice, so you'll still be seeing me, don't worry. But this is closure for me. I'm moving on with my life, and that's true freedom and joy. Please respect my privacy and the privacy of my future family, and don't speculate or pry. This is my wish and my gift to my family," which I totally support. I think that is so wonderful that she is, you know, making the decision to keep her her own life private. That's the least she deserves after having her whole life exploited online for years and going through all of this abuse. And to some degree, it's so sad that even after the kids were rescued and Ruby and Jodi were arrested, like then they even got even more famous. Like people who had never even heard of them. My dad knew about this. He doesn't watch any of this YouTube stuff. He saw it on CNN. So the publicity that they got from this was just insane. And I think it's wonderful that she decided to write this book and, talk about it from her own voice. Because it's her story to tell. And so I want to read one last quote. This is the very end of the book. And she says, "My focus is now turned toward the future, a blank canvas waiting to be painted. But this I know, I will break the cycle. I will trust the children, the child within me, and the children I will one day nurture. I will trust in their resilience, their wisdom, their limitless imagination, and their innate capacity for love. I will guide them, but I will also learn from them and allow their innocence and wonder to heal the wounded parts of my soul. Together, we will create a new story. Now that I have peace, this is my promise. And now that I have happiness, this is my purpose, finally." She's an amazing, amazing woman, and I truly wish her nothing but the best. And I know that we had talked a lot about, what was covered, but there are obviously things that we did not cover that are in the book. So if you're interested in hearing more, I highly recommend checking out her book and reading it for yourself. She's
Again, the Audible is really moving, though, especially just like hearing her.
Yeah, the fact that she tells
story.
it. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, she just seems can't believe how young she is and has been through so much already. Has younger siblings to look after. And I wish them all the best too, obviously. I hope that the 4 youngest ones are, safe and in good hands and have the best possible outcome and go on to, have actual loving, accepting, nurturing families. It's the least they deserve. But yeah, that is all we have for today, guys. Thanks so much for hanging in there with us and listening. This is a long one and really intense, but I think that this is so important to talk about. And also there's going to be a documentary coming out in February on Hulu.
Yep.
Yeah, on Hulu.
Yep. On Hulu.
Multiple parts. I think it's 3 parts.
3 parts, yep.
Devil in the Family.
Devil in the Family.
On February 27th on Hulu.
I'll definitely be watching that. And maybe we'll talk about that. I mean, I'm assuming there's going to be a lot of other, stuff in there. And because Chad's in that one too, huh?
Yep.
And he's never really spoken about anything. So,
they're going to go in more depth, it says.
Yeah, he has a whole story for himself to tell. So, yeah. But that is going to be it today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it. We will see you on the next sesh. But until then, keep it fresh.